At 2.25 million light years from Earth, the Andromeda Galaxy is the most distant object visible to the naked human eye. It takes up about as much space in the sky as the full moon. It's a great target for astrophotographers, but it's actually too large for the Hubble Space Telescope to see well. It's simply too big and too close. This image is the highest resolution photo ever taken of the Andromeda Galaxy, and it was taken with the Hubble Space Telescope. This image was made from 411 different exposures, and the mosaic totals about 1.5 billion pixels, even though it doesn't even include the entire galaxy. We are so used to seeing stunning images like this that it's really easy to forget that we've only known about galaxies for 100 years now. Yes, you heard that right. Galaxies are only 100 years old because it was December 30th, 1924, when Sir Edwin Hubble first published his findings that galaxies were their own type of object, their own thing. Here's how the story goes. The Milky Way has been known about since humans first looked up at the sky, and lots of different cultures have stories to explain this band of light which crosses the sky. To the naked eye, it's a patch of sky which looks, well, rather milky. We get the word galaxy from this simple observation because the ancient Greek word for milk was galact. That may sound familiar to you because the main sugar in milk is galactose. However, the ancients had no idea that the Milky Way is us looking out at the disk of our galaxy of billions of stars from the inside. You have to fast forward a few thousand years to Galileo in the early 1600s before that idea can even begin taking shape. See, Galileo decided to train his newly invented telescope at the Milky Way, and that's when he realized that it was made up of individual stars. He decided to map or at least count the number of stars in that section of the sky, but there are so many that he very quickly abandoned the idea. A lot of astronomy in the first few hundred years after the invention of the telescope was centered around discovering and mapping the locations of different kinds of objects. Observers found hundreds of faint, fuzzy objects, which they called nebula. It wasn't long before they noticed that a number of nebulae had a similar kind of spiral shape to them. The nature of these objects sparked a lot of debate all through the 1800s. Remember, this was before the camera, so the only way to see more detail in a spiral nebula was to use larger telescopes. And that meant you also had to have some kind of mechanized tracking to follow the object. Both of these were outrageously expensive. It used to be that astronomers had to be very skilled at sketching what they saw through their telescopes. We have hundreds of sketches from this era showing the best views of the spiral nebulae. But still, nobody knew what these things were, and everyone thought they were simply oddly shaped objects at the same distances as stars and other regular nebulae that astronomers routinely looked at. But photography changed all of that. The first known photograph of the Andromeda Nebula was taken by Isaac Roberts in 1888, and that photo revealed for the first time the details in the spiral structure of the object. And that's when the storm really began. Soon there were photographs of other spiral nebulae, and everyone was trying to figure out exactly what was going on with these objects and how do we explain what we're seeing. However, in 1924, Edwin Hubble used the 100-inch Hooker telescope at the Mount Wilson Observatory just outside of Los Angeles to change our understanding of the universe. Those observations marked the first time that anyone was able to see individual stars in the Andromeda Nebula. Hubble was even able to identify several Cepheid variables, specific types of stars which allowed him to measure the distance to the Andromeda Nebula. And it turns out it was several times further away than the most distant object anywhere in the Milky Way. And this proved that the Andromeda Nebula was not part of the Milky Way. It was a galaxy in its own right. Up until that time, the word galaxy was a really general term used by astronomers to describe a system or collection of stars. However, Hubble's discovery changed that definition completely. Each galaxy is now seen as its own island universe, a system of millions or usually billions of stars held together by their mutual gravitational attraction. And so it is that December 30th, 2024 can officially count as the 100th birthday of galaxies.